I still remember the night I died. The fire didn't burn half as much as his betrayal did. I screamed his name, Ezra, not for help, but for answers. Because I couldn't understand. How could the man whose hands once painted constellations on my skin now be the one who ordered them to shatter me? My heart was still beating when the flames swallowed me whole. But even as my body turned to ash, I whispered a promise. If there's a next life, I'll make you remember what you destroyed. Death was supposed to be the end. But the gods must have pitied me, because when I opened my eyes again, I wasn't gone. I was reborn, in a new time, in a new face, but with the same pain haunting my veins. And the moment I felt the faint heartbeat inside me, I knew, even after death, even after everything, a piece of him still lived within me. His child, our curse, my revenge. So when fate brought me back to him, to the man who once watched me burn, I smiled. Because this time I won't be the one on my knees. He will. The world I returned to was nothing like the one I had left behind. It smelled of rain on cold stone, of wet earth and iron, and yet it carried the faintest trace of smoke, a ghostly reminder of the fire that had ended me once before. I opened my eyes slowly, each blink a small rebellion against the darkness that wanted to swallow me whole. My body, it felt different, stronger, yet every nerve screamed with memory. The heat of the flames, the searing pain, the betrayal of the man I had loved more than my own life. Ezra, I whispered, the name tasting like ash on my tongue. My throat tightened as if my voice had been bound for years. The memory of him, cold, untouchable, the one who had handed me to death, pressed against my chest like a weight I could not lift. I lay there in the quiet of my new room, staring at unfamiliar walls. They were pale, stark, unfeeling, perfect. Perfect for hiding, for becoming someone new, someone who could rise from the ruins of a life once destroyed. I flexed my fingers, feeling the pulse of this body, this second chance, this opportunity for revenge, period. A small, persistent warmth stirred in me. At first, I thought it was fear, but no, it was life, my life. Not the life I had lost, not the life I had mourned, but this life, and something else. Something small, yet unbreakably insistent, beating in rhythm with my own heart. A child, a piece of him, a part of the past I could not undo, no matter how hard I tried. I stood slowly, legs trembling with the memory of death. The mirror across the room reflected a face I did not fully recognize. Sharper, colder, beautiful in a way that was almost cruel. My eyes caught their reflection, green, like the first leaves of spring, but edged with a hardness that had never been there before. I was no longer just Riven, the gentle painter who trusted too much. I was Riven, reborn, with memory, with purpose, with a secret that would one day shatter the man who had once shattered me. Outside, the city stirred. Merchants shouted, horses clattered on stone, and the sky burned with dawn. And somewhere in that waking world, he lived. Ezra, the man who should never have mattered to me again, the man who had come to matter more than anything. I clenched my fists. The ember of my anger sparked into flame. He would pay. One way or another, he would remember, and when he did, he would feel what it was to lose everything he had ever held dear. But not yet. For now, I had to breathe. For now, I had to hide. For now, I had to let the world forget Riven, and I would become someone no one, not even him, would ever recognize. Until the moment came when the ashes of the past would rise and burn brighter than the fire that had tried to claim me. The city didn't know me, and that was exactly how I wanted it. Every corner I passed, every street I walked, whispered anonymity. I could be anyone here, a simple painter, a stranger, a shadow moving through the lives of people who would never ask questions. And yet, every brushstroke, every sketch, carried memory. Every line I drew bore the ghost of the man who had left me for dead. My new workshop was small, tucked between narrow cobblestone lanes where sunlight fell like scattered gold. It smelled of paint and wood and the faint, lingering scent of rain that had seeped through the roof. Here I could breathe. Here I could hide. Here I could remember without anyone noticing the tremor in my hands when I thought of him. The first time I painted his face, without realizing it, I froze. Ezra. I didn't intend it, but the angles of his jaw, the cruel softness of his eyes in memory, crept into my mind as if my heart had betrayed me. The canvas stared back, and I almost laughed at the irony. A man I once loved, now trapped forever in pigments and shadows. And I was free, yes, but only in body. My heart, my soul carried the weight of the past, and the child I bore, a quiet, persistent heartbeat within me, reminded me that freedom was a lie. That connection, once severed by betrayal and fire, still pulsed through me in secret. The days passed. I became Riven the painter, admired for talent, respected for solitude, invisible to those who would have once recognized me. And yet, destiny has a way of tipping the scales at the wrong moment. I first saw him in the crowded streets. Ezra, taller than I remembered, still sharp, still impossibly magnetic. He didn't recognize me. How could he? But something in the way he paused, the brief hesitation of his stride, the fleeting shadow of recognition in his eyes, made my pulse quicken. I didn't approach, not yet. I walked past, my cloak pulled tight, a smile pressed lightly on my lips, one that hid rage, grief, and the secret truth beating within me. I watched him interact with others, charismatic, commanding, oblivious to the storm that had been quietly reborn in the city that had once been ours. Every encounter, even from a distance, stoked the fire in my chest. I would wait, I would observe, I would let him live, for now, ignorant of the fact that the boy he had once destroyed had returned, stronger, colder, and carrying the consequence of his cruelty. And deep down, beneath the layers of vengeance, beneath the quiet heartbeat that was ours alone, I felt the faintest pulse of something I had thought lost forever: love. But not the same love that had left me in ashes. This love was sharpened, tempered in fire, carrying both fury and desire. It was a dangerous thing, and it would not forgive. The city moved on around me, but I knew, with a certainty that made my blood run cold, that Ezra and I were no longer in separate worlds. Our paths were destined to collide, and when they did, neither of us would ever be the same. The gallery was quiet, suffused with the soft glow of lanterns reflecting off polished wood. My paintings hung along the walls, like silent witnesses, each stroke a memory, each shadow a whisper of a life I had once lost. And then I saw him. Ezra, standing at the far end of the room, tall, commanding, as if the air itself bowed to him. He didn't recognize me. At least, I told myself he didn't. But there was something in the tilt of his head, the narrow line of his eyes, that made my chest tighten. I kept my distance, pretending to admire the canvases, my fingers brushing lightly over the textured surfaces, as if tracing the past itself. But my heart knew better. Every beat was a drum of warning, every breath a reminder that he was here, and fate had not finished its cruel work. He moved closer, and something unspoken passed between us, a flicker of memory, a pull of familiarity he could not name. I felt it too, the ghost of our past life, brushing against the surface of this one. My pulse quickened, a mixture of fear, desire, and the faint, insistent beat beneath my ribs that reminded me of the child carrying its blood. "Beautiful work," he said finally, his voice low, smooth with an edge of curiosity. I didn't flinch, though every fiber of me wanted to. I turned to him, smiling lightly, careful, controlled. "Thank you," I replied, my voice steady, hiding the storm beneath. "It's personal." He studied me then, as if seeing something familiar, yet unplaceable. There was a pause, just long enough for my mind to reel with possibilities. Could he feel it? The connection we once had? Or was it merely chance, fate teasing me with glimpses of the past? Ezra's gaze lingered, intense, as if searching for answers I refused to give. And in that moment, something shifted, a subtle crack in the armor of the man who had once let me die. I wanted to reach for him, to warn him, to tell him the truth, that I had returned, stronger, that I carried a secret he could never ignore. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I smiled again, a delicate, controlled curve of lips, and walked past him. My cloak swirled around me, hiding the storm within. And I felt it, a spark, a recognition in his eyes that would haunt him long after tonight. The game had begun, and I would win. Sleep had never come easily to Ezra, but these nights were different. He would wait in the darkness of his chamber, sheets tangled around him, heart hammering as if some unseen hand had pressed against his chest. And there, always there, was a fleeting image, impossible yet insistent. A green-eyed man, softer than memory, yet edged with a fire he couldn't name. He tried to dismiss it, telling himself it was imagination, fatigue, stress of the city, the weight of responsibility. But the memory lingered, clinging to the corners of his mind like smoke. Every brush of shadow, every fragment of a dream, tugged at something he had buried long ago, something he could not forget, no matter how hard he tried. And then he saw him again. Riven, standing in the gallery, light spilling across his sharp features, yet somehow warmer than he remembered. He didn't recognize the man at first, not truly, but something in his posture, the tilt of his chin, the way he carried himself, set something deep inside Ezra on edge. The dreams, the familiarity, the ache he could not place. Ezra found himself thinking about him constantly, in meetings, at the council, in the quiet moments before sleep claimed him. His heart betrayed him, fluttering unexpectedly whenever Riven's name whispered itself in his mind. Though he did not yet know it, and somewhere beneath the surface of his carefully constructed life, a seed of obsession took root. He did not yet know why he felt this pull, this haunting need to watch, to know, to remember, but he would. Because Riven was not just a stranger. He was someone he had once destroyed, someone he had loved and discarded. And even if Ezra did not remember the night of fire, did not remember the betrayal, something in the air, something in the way Riven carried himself demanded acknowledgement. And the faintest, most impossible whisper of truth lingered unnoticed. The child within Riven, the heartbeat he could not yet sense, was a tether, a link to a past he had no recollection of, but one that fate would force him to remember. Ezra did not yet know that he was walking toward the most dangerous thing he had ever faced. But the universe had no mercy, and neither would Riven. The echoes of a forgotten love were beginning to call him. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the gallery, casting golden lines across the polished wooden floors. Riven adjusted his cloak and set a brush down, glancing up just as a shadow crossed the doorway. Ezra, he didn't enter as a man uncertain of his steps. No, he moved with the quiet authority of someone used to being obeyed, to having the world bend slightly to his presence. And yet, something in his eyes betrayed the tiniest flicker of curiosity, the faintest pull toward a memory he could not place. Riven's heart beat harder than it had in days, no, years. He had prepared for this, rehearsed every word, every glance, but nothing could prepare him for seeing Ezra so close, so real, so alive. After all that had passed between them, "Good morning," Ezra said, voice low, smooth, and unnervingly familiar. "I didn't expect to find you here so early." Riven tilted his head, allowing a casual smile to mask the storm inside. "I like to start my work before the world becomes noisy," Ezra's gaze lingered longer than necessary, studying him as if trying to pull fragments of a forgotten past from the depths of his mind. The recognition hovered, just out of reach, making the air between them electric with tension. Every movement Riven made, every brushstroke, every turn of the head was measured, careful, and yet the proximity was dangerous. Every beat of his heart reminded him of the life he once had, the betrayal, and the secret he carried inside. The faint pulse beneath his ribs was a constant whisper. The child, the tie that binds him to Ezra forever. Ezra stepped closer, unconsciously closing the distance between them. The gallery seemed to shrink around the two of them, the world fading until all that existed was the magnetic pull they could no longer deny. You feel familiar," Ezra said suddenly, voice barely above a whisper. His brow furrowed, frustration and curiosity warring in his expression. "I can't place it, but there's something about you." Riven's chest tightened. He wanted to speak, to reveal everything, to let him feel the weight of his past betrayal. But he didn't. Not yet. He let the words die on his tongue, letting the silence speak louder than any confession could. The space between them was taut, fragile, a thread stretched so thin it might snap at any moment. And in that delicate tension, both men understood something unspoken. They were on the edge of destruction, but neither could step back. And as Ezra's gaze bore into him, Riven felt it, a thrill, a promise, and a warning all at once. He was close enough to break him, and perhaps, if the fates allowed, close enough to claim the part of him that had once belonged to Ezra forever. Ezra paced his study that evening, the city lights spilling through the tall windows like shards of gold and fire. He could not shake the image of Riven, green eyes sharp, lips curved in a subtle, unreadable smile. Movements that seemed both deliberate and impossibly familiar. He didn't understand it. He didn't want to. And yet the more he tried to push the thoughts away, the harder they clawed back into his mind. Every brush of memory, every fleeting glance, whispered a name he had long buried: Riven. Ezra had always believed himself untouchable, powerful, cold, untouched by guilt or sentiment. But now, the walls he had built around his heart began to shiver. A small, almost imperceptible crack had appeared, and it frightened him more than any battle or betrayal ever could. And then there was the feeling he could not name, deep in his chest, whenever he thought of Riven. A pull, an ache, a recognition he could not explain. It gnawed at him, unrelenting, as though something vital had been taken, and he didn't even realize it. Riven, the man who should have been a stranger, now a constant presence in his mind. The man whose mere nearness set his heart racing, whose subtle movements haunted his dreams. Ezra's hand tightened on the edge of the desk, knuckles whitening. He hated the vulnerability. He hated the confusion. He hated that, despite himself, he cared. And yet, there was something else, something deeper, more dangerous, a thread that tied him to Riven, invisible yet unbreakable. He could not see it, could not understand it, but the universe had not yet finished its work. Somewhere, Riven smiled privately, knowing the first crack had begun. Ezra, unaware of the child beating silently within him, was already falling. The slow, inevitable descent had begun, and nothing, not pride, not power, not denial, would stop it. Because love, no matter how long buried, never stays buried forever. And for Ezra, the first crack in his heart was just the beginning of the storm to come. The room was quiet, save for the faint rustle of leaves brushing against the windows. Riven sat at his desk, hands trembling slightly as he sketched, but not a single line went wrong. Each stroke was precise, deliberate, a silent rebellion against the chaos that had once destroyed him. And beneath his ribs, it beat, a tiny, stubborn heartbeat that reminded him of what he carried, the living proof of the past, of Ezra, of everything he had lost and survived. He pressed a hand to his stomach, fingers brushing against the faint curve of life hidden beneath his cloak. A shiver ran down his spine, equal parts fear and longing. The child was quiet, hidden, safe, but every movement, every flutter, was a reminder that the past could not be buried forever. It existed now, tangible, undeniable, and intimately tied to the man he would soon see again. Ezra. He didn't know, couldn't know, and yet, somewhere in the quiet of this night, Riven imagined the moment he would tell him. Imagined the way Ezra's eyes would widen, the shock, the awe, the raw, unfiltered emotion that would wash over him. The thought made his heart ache, but not with fear, not entirely. It was a promise. Riven knew that for now, the secret was his alone. He had survived fire once. He had hidden in plain sight, moved in shadows, and kept himself alive. He could wait. He could observe. He could let the slow burn of tension, the pull of forbidden love, simmer until the perfect moment. And yet, in the quiet moments, when the night wrapped around him like a velvet shroud, he allowed himself to imagine a different life. A life where Ezra knew, where he understood, where the love they had lost, the betrayal, the fire, the ashes, all of it, could be rewritten. But that was still the future. For now, there was only silence, the soft, persistent heartbeat beneath his hands, and the knowledge that soon everything would change. Because secrets have a way of surfacing, and hearts, no matter how guarded, have a way of breaking open. The studio smelled of turpentine and fresh paint, but it did little to mask the heat pressing against Riven's skin. He gripped the edge of the table, trying to steady his breathing. The heartbeat beneath him, his secret, his tether to the past, pulsed insistently, reminding him that he could no longer pretend his life was his own alone. Ezra had appeared unannounced. His shadow filled the doorway, sharp and commanding, the intensity in his eyes almost tangible. Riven felt it before he looked, a gravitational pull that drew him forward, even as every instinct screamed to retreat. "You've been avoiding me," Ezra said, his voice smooth, controlled, but the tension beneath it betrayed a flicker of desperation. "I can feel it. You're hiding something." Riven's chest tightened. He could lie. He had perfected it over weeks. But every fiber of his being screamed that the truth could no longer be contained. He exhaled slowly, letting the faintest tremor escape his lips. "I'm not who you think I am," he admitted, voice low, heavy with memory. "And there are things about me, things you don't know, things that could destroy everything you think you understand." Ezra's brow furrowed, frustration clashing with curiosity, his gaze unwavering. "Then tell me," he demanded, stepping closer. "Tell me before I find out on my own." The proximity, the intensity, made Riven's heart pound. Every moment felt dangerous, electrified. And then he placed a trembling hand on his stomach, letting the truth slip out, unspoken but undeniable. "Someone inside me," he said softly. "A life I carry, yours." Ezra froze, the words echoing in his mind before he could fully process them. His hand twitched, hovering near Riven as if he wanted to reach, to confirm, to deny. But the truth was undeniable. The heartbeat beneath Riven's fingers was more than a secret. It was a bond, a tether to the past, and a consequence of everything Ezra had done. For the first time, Ezra faltered. The cold, untouchable man who had thought himself in control of every outcome felt an unfamiliar weight pressing against his chest. Guilt, obsession, desire, fear, love all at once. Riven looked up, green eyes steady but fierce, and met him. "I survived the fire you left me for," he whispered. "I survived because I had to. But now it's your turn to understand what it means to lose control, to care, to feel." Ezra swallowed hard, his breath catching as the first crack in his heart widened into something undeniable. He couldn't move, couldn't speak, and yet every inch of him ached to close the distance, to cradle the life that tied them together. The room felt impossibly small. The air around them thickened with unspoken emotion. And in that fragile, electrified silence, both men understood something unavoidable. The past had returned, and the consequences were alive, beating, and irrevocable. Beloved Ezra's hands shook, a rare and terrifying loss of control that left him stunned. The truth he had only begun to sense now slammed into him with unbearable force. Riven carried his child, his blood, his consequence. The life that had once been nothing more than memory, now beating within the man he had once betrayed. Period. How? His voice broke, a mixture of disbelief, guilt, and the first whisper of fear. I didn't. Riven's eyes, steady and fierce, met his with an intensity that burned. You did, he said softly, each word a knife wrapped in silk. You let me die once. You thought my life, my love, my heart were yours to discard. But now you see the price of your cruelty. Ezra swallowed hard, the weight of years pressing down on him. Every memory of fire, of betrayal, of moments lost, flashed before his eyes. He wanted to apologize, to beg, to erase the past, but he knew there was no undoing what had been done. Riven stepped closer, the pulse beneath his hand reminding them both of the fragile life that bound them together. This child, he said, voice low, trembling with a mixture of fury and hope, is proof that even in death, even in betrayal, I survived. And you will remember what it is to feel powerless. Ezra's chest tightened. The man who had never faltered, never bent, now felt himself breaking. His pride, his control, his cold certainty, all crumbled under the weight of Riven's gaze and the undeniable truth. I'm sorry, he whispered, almost inaudibly, yet the words carried every ounce of regret he had buried. I never meant. Riven shook his head, a faint, bitter smile touching his lips. It's too late for words. Actions speak louder. Feel it. Feel everything you lost the moment you let me die. The space between them was electric, every glance, every movement charged with years of buried emotion. Ezra reached out, hesitant, trembling. Riven didn't pull back. He allowed him, letting the slow, aching tension ripple between them, knowing the moment was inevitable. Their hands brushed, and in that simple contact, a storm broke. Desire, regret, longing, obsession, all collided. Ezra's control shattered as he finally understood. The love he had discarded, the man he had betrayed, and the life he had inadvertently created were all here, alive, inescapable, irrevocable. For Riven, it was a victory sweet and terrifying. For Ezra, it was punishment, raw and undeniable, delivered not by fire this time, but by love, obsession, and the undeniable weight of what he had lost. And in the silence that followed, broken only by the faint heartbeat beneath Riven's hand, both knew the game had changed. Love had turned into punishment, and neither would survive unchanged. Ezra sat alone in the grand hall of his estate, the flickering candlelight casting long shadows across the polished floor. The throne that had always symbolized his control, his power, now felt like a cage. Every echo of the empty room whispered Riven's name. Every gust of wind carried the weight of the truth he could no longer escape. He had never cried before. Not for loss, not for failure, not for love. But now the tears came unbidden, burning trails down his face as guilt, desire, and heartbreak collided. He thought of Riven, of the man he had destroyed, the life he had discarded, and the child growing silently inside him. How could he have been so blind, so cruel, so certain of his own righteousness? Every mistake, every moment of arrogance flashed before him, relentless. and he realized something he had never admitted, even to himself. He was powerless without Riven. A soft sound drew him from his spiral of self-loathing. He looked up and saw Riven entering the hall, calm, poised, but with an intensity that made the air itself shiver. The faint curve of his lips held both forgiveness and judgment, a reminder of the man Ezra had wronged and the power he now wielded simply by existing. "You don't deserve this," Ezra whispered, his voice trembling. "I can't fix what I did, but please, let me try. Let me be there for you. For us. For—" His voice faltered as he gestured helplessly toward Riven's stomach. "For them." Riven's eyes softened, but only slightly. He stepped closer, letting the flickering light play across his features. "You don't get to demand forgiveness," he said quietly, every word deliberate. "But you can prove that you've changed, that you understand what it means to care, to lose, to love without control." Ezra swallowed, nodding, a shiver of relief and fear running through him. For the first time, he felt the weight of vulnerability, a state he had never known, never allowed himself to feel, and yet he embraced it, willing to bear every ounce of his soul to the man who had returned from death, stronger, unbroken, and carrying his blood within him. The air between them trembled with anticipation, a slow, electric charge, and though the road ahead was uncertain, fraught with danger, emotion, and the scars of the past, Ezra knew one thing: he would not let Riven walk away again, because he had already lost too much. The moon hung low over the estate, casting silver light across the gardens. Riven stood beneath the arching branches, the faint rustle of leaves carrying the scent of rain and earth. Every step Ezra took toward him was weighted with hesitation, longing, and the knowledge of the past he could never undo. "Riven," he breathed, voice breaking, fingers trembling. I can't bear this anymore. I can't lose you again." Riven's green eyes softened, but a flicker of fire remained, a reminder of all the pain and betrayal he had endured. "You lost me once," he whispered, voice low, almost a warning. "This is your chance. Not just to say sorry, but to show me what you mean." Ezra's hands reached for him, and Riven did not step back. He let the warmth of his presence fold around him, felt the weight of Ezra's desperation, the longing in every inch of his body. For the first time in years, they stood face to face, unshielded, raw, and vulnerable. "I will do anything," Ezra murmured, voice trembling. "Anything to protect you, to love you, to—" His words faltered as he looked at the subtle curve of Riven's stomach, the life beating quietly beneath his hands. "To love them too." Riven's lips parted slightly, and he finally allowed himself a fragile, cautious smile. "It's not enough to say it," he said softly. "You must feel it, and show it, every day." Ezra leaned closer, his forehead resting against Riven's, breathing mingling, hearts racing in tandem. "I will," he promised, and the sincerity in his eyes burned with an intensity that stole the breath from Riven's chest. And then, in the quiet of the night, the embrace became more than just a gesture. It became a declaration, a surrender, a binding of souls that no betrayal, no fire, no time could undo. Fingers threaded through fingers, bodies pressed together, and the tension of years, of fire, of longing, melted into something fragile and infinite. For Riven, it was not just forgiveness, it was triumph, release, and the birth of a new life full of love and protection. For Ezra, it was punishment transformed into salvation, obsession into devotion, guilt into a burning desire to never let go. The child beneath Riven's heart stirred, sensing the unity, the love, the protection surrounding them. And for the first time, Riven allowed himself to hope, not just for survival, not just for revenge, but for life, love, and a future they could create together. The night stretched around them, silent witnesses to the embrace that would define their lives. And in that perfect, fragile moment, they understood the past had returned to shape them, but the future, their future, was theirs to claim. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose. Riven and Ezra stood on the balcony, the city below still stirring, unaware of the quiet revolution of hearts that had taken place above. Ezra held Riven close, one hand cradling the subtle curve of the life within him, the other wrapped around his waist. Every breath, every heartbeat was a promise, not of perfection, but of presence, devotion, and an unbreakable bond. "I've wasted so long," Ezra whispered, voice thick with emotion. "I didn't see, I didn't feel, but I promise I will never let go again. Not you, not them, never." Riven tilted his head, green eyes glimmering with a mixture of love and caution. The fire of the past softened, but not extinguished. "Then show me, Ezra. Every day, protect us, cherish us, and remember that love is not just passion. It's patience, trust, and sacrifice." Ezra nodded solemnly, lips brushing against Riven's temple. "I will. All of it, I swear." The child within Riven stirred again, tiny but insistent, and Riven smiled softly, feeling the miracle of life, of love, of second chances. The heartbeat beneath his hand was more than a secret now. It was hope, a tether that bound them irrevocably together. They kissed then, slow and deliberate, an embrace that carried years of longing, sorrow, and desire. Every touch, every whisper, was a vow renewed. The fire of their past, the betrayals, the pain, had not vanished, but it had forged something stronger, something real. For Riven, it was freedom, love, and the promise of a future he had only dared to dream of. For Ezra, it was redemption, obsession transformed into devotion, and the understanding that life without Riven was unimaginable. And as the first rays of sunlight fell upon them, the city awakening below, they knew this truth. They had been through fire, betrayal, and loss. But now they had each other, and a new life beating beneath Riven's heart to carry forward. Together they were reborn. Together love had returned.